Alright then guys, I've been wanting to do this video for quite a while, and now my YouTube account's been verified. That means I can crack on with it and do a nice long video. Just wanted to do a video about how Black Thunder came about, really. There's not going to be a lot of video in this, so whatever, stick your headphones on, chuck it in your pocket, whatever. It's basically just going to be a podcast sort of thing, but yeah, just wanted to get out about, how Black Thunder came about and what the deal was, really. So I got the truck in about 2015, mid 2015. I'd been looking at Rangers for quite a while, probably about 9 months. Went and looked at a few. To cut a long story short, I went and looked at one down south, and the bloke kind of put it out for a test drive for me, so I said okay, jump in, and I drove it, it was fine. Went back, it was no good, so basically left it, kicked the tyres and left. But I went to look at another one, and that drove miles better. So I was like, I've seen these two, but I've not seen all there is, sort of thing. So I was keeping on looking, and I see this one I like down in Bury St Edmunds at the Mark 1. So I phoned a bloke to check he was open, but I didn't phone to say what truck I was looking at in case he was going to screw me over. So I got there and that, and he's like, what you looking for? I said, oh, this 2002 Ranger. And he's like, oh, bugger, I'd taken a deposit on that one. So I was like, ah, crap. So he's like, you obviously want a Ranger? I said, yeah, looking to spend about £3 or whatever. And he's like taking around these Mark 3s and stuff, and they're all like 5 or 6 grand, and they're not got like a scratch on them. And I sort of said, have you got anything more down to earth, anything for an old boy like me? And that's when he goes, oh well, we've got a few down the workshop. So he takes me a couple units down, and takes me in the body shop, because this is the weekend, so all the body shop guys are home, it's all locked up. And he takes me in there and that, and there's a couple Mark 2s in there, about to get blown over and stuff, and the dent's sorted. And there was this one outside. And I sort of said, what's the deal with this? And he said, well, I've took it in Part X, I haven't valeted it yet, I haven't had a chance to look at it. That's sort of the next one in to get tidied up. So anyway, we're sort of toing and froing, and I'm looking at these others thinking I don't want one that's been resprayed. I mean, fuck me. I'm not going to be like, Miss Daisy with it. So we come to like talking and whatever, and he says, you can give this one a try. So he pops a bonnet and whatever and have a look round it, and it won't start because the battery's flat. But his lad goes to get the jump leads, and as usual, he stuck the jump leads on or whatever, and it fired straight up, and there was no nasty noises, and it was smooth and everything. So I thought, alright, we've got a good, good base to work with here. So she was a nice truck. And I got in it and that, and I was looking round, and there's all like weight ticket in the glove box, caravan brochure, stuff from the kids in the back, like playing cards and things in the drawer, and like a CD in the stereo and stuff like that. So it was clear he hadn't been in it yet. He just kind of took it in, and that's how it was, that's how it sat. So I got to thinking that this could be quite an honest truck. So rather than have one that's been tick-tarted around, get one that's just honest as it is. It's just come in as it is, basically. So took it out for a test drive and that, and it drove all pucker. So the bloke's kind of saying, if you want this one, it'll be £4.5 or whatever, and you'll have to give us a couple of weeks to sort out the bodywork, and it needs an exhaust. So I kind of come to an agreement with him and said, look, I'll have it how it is, because even if you say you've serviced it or whatever, the first thing I'm going to do when I get home is drop the oil. So come to an agreement, said yeah, I'll give you a deposit now, got it for 3.6, went home whatever and sorted the insurance, and then I couldn't wait, so I went back later that day and went and got it, and he knocked a bit of money off because it needed an exhaust and whatnot. So I got it for 3.6, which weren't too bad, down from what it was originally. I got it, done about 100,000 miles, and it was in good shape, to be honest. So I got it home, and like I say, the first thing I did was just just blitz the truck, you know, hoover it, clean it, oils, fluids, coolant, the lot basically, major service. So then meanwhile, whilst this is all going on, because I've been looking at Rangers for so goddamn long, my mate had already gone out and bought a Frontera. So he's like itching to get his fingers into Green Lane, and so was I. So we started going out and about just the local lanes and droves and things, and having quite a good time with it really. But we were just kind of on road tyres, standard height, you know, old boys basically. We weren't as into it seriously as we are now. So we're going through. Then we got it in the summer, and it gets to sort of September time, and we've been out mucking around in the lanes and things. And I'm on the way home because we've gone to like God knows where it was, and we're on the way home, and I come past a few miles away from my house. I come past this bit, and I see the sign saying byway, and I thought, yeah, we'll have a look down there. We'll have a crack at that. And cue the story, you know, like 8 hours later, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm still there, sleeping on the back seat, because I'm up to my axles and I've made a fuck up. So after that, I was like, nah, need a winch, right? So I'm kind of tarting around, looking for winches and things, and looking at winch bumpers, and no one's built a winch bumper for these, and the Australians have got them, but how the hell do you get one from Australia, you know? So I'm still looking at that, and I'm thinking, you know, what am I going to buy? It's going to be expensive and whatever. And just as it happens, I was putting the canopy on for the winter and stuff, and I was doing a dump run, and I drove past the mechanics who I used to work for, and he's like, oh, you know, how you I got this D3 compressor here, air suspension compressor. He goes, you like fiddling with stuff, don't you? I said, yeah. He goes, well, do you want it? Because the lady's got a new one or whatever, and this is just cool. I said, yeah, mate, go for it. So just before Christmas 2015, I got this D3 air suspension compressor, put like a valve block on it and a stop-start switch and everything, and that's been mounted under the bonnet for the last 4 years. So we had onboard air and things for filling up tyres and mucking around, and that was also powering me air horns that I'd got, because before I even bought the truck, I'd bought set train horns for it, so that's quite good fun. But yeah, so that was kind of going on. We was always on the projects from the first sort of 6 months I had it, and like I say, I'd put the canopy on and stuff, and we were talking about going away for a trip up Lake District. So I was like, right, I've got to get my button gear now. So a bloke at work used to be into Green Lane and stuff back in the day, and he had an SJ, and he's like, oh, I got this old winch if you want it, you know, 60 quid, and I'm like, oh, right. So I got this old winch, and it was a small one, don't get me wrong, it was a damn little thing, but I got cracking on that one weekend, and I built this little bull bar out of like 50 by 25 box down to the chassis mounts and stuff, and it held this little winch fine. Put a set of spotlights on the front, and it looked pucker. So we'd got that on there, and I tried that out, and it seemed alright if you put a snatch block on it. And we was obviously going up Lake Districts. I thought, if we get any situations, that should be just enough to get us out. And the other thing I wanted to do, because we were sleeping in the back of the trucks at the time, was make some sort of sleeping arrangements. So I sort of ply lined the back of the truck with like a wheel box, basically, like the back of a Defender. So you've got like 2 right angle bits either side of the wheel arches all the way back, and then I screwed battens to the side of that, and we had like a load of boards basically that you could roll out, stuff shit underneath, and you could sleep on that. Just rolled out a sleeping bag. So I quite like that. Went up and done our Scotland and Lake District trip and whatever. Had a good load of fun. Got stuck whilst I was up there. Couldn't winch forward because I didn't have anything to winch off of. Mate had to drive me back and whatever, and we got out eventually, but again we was on road tyres and just doing easy tracks and things. So we come back off that, and just before Christmas I'd put an order in for some mud tyres, and they'd finally been delivered the day after I got back from Lake District. So I was a bit bummed about that, but the week after I got invited out to Thetford Forest with a few Land Rovers and got the tyres thrown on because before Christmas I'd also got some Hilux surf rims and I've been sandblasting them in lunch hour, and I got them from the powder coaters. So they'd come back and I was waiting on tyres, so once they arrived I got them fitted, got the wheels switched over in time, and then on the weekend went to this green laning deal up Thetford. And that totally opened my eyes to green laning. I mean, before it was kind of just like driving the droves and the green grassy tracks that were about, and Thetford's a good crack. Yeah, Thetford's good. There's plenty of them and they're long and you don't see too many people, if you know what I mean. There's so many of them, you don't usually see many people about. So after that I was like, this is something I really want to get into, and I started looking at more mods for the truck and basically couldn't find half of them. So I'm still looking and thinking out things to do, and I ended up making some diff breathers because they're obviously the first thing that go in the water. So I couldn't find them, so I ended up making my own, custom making them. And I took the canopy off for the summer and built a headache rack slash roll bar sort of thing that was all solid steel, you know, it's 50mm box, nice heavy wool stuff. And I built that, and to be honest I quite liked it. It had a little roof rack that overhung the cab and had me spotlights and me CB aerial on it. That come in bloody handy. But I was going on all these tracks and stuff, and I was always going through water and thinking, God, I don't know how deep this is, I don't know what's underneath it, you know. How am I going to drop down a hole all of a sudden? So again I started looking for stuff, started looking at snorkels. Couldn't get hold of a Mark II snorkel for love nor money. So I took a punt on a Mark III one. I thought the Mark 1s, 2s and 3s, you know, and 4s even, they all look kind of brothers and sisters, you know, they're all a bit similar. So I managed to find a Mark III snorkel on eBay for like 70 quid. Took a punt on that, it arrived, duct taped it to the wing and the A-pillar basically, tie it up, and was like, you know, this could work. So I set about putting it on, but then realised the Z joiner was a different size. So I'd made a little adapter ring up at work, sorted all that out, and then the time obviously came to fit it. Now the template was for a Mark III, so that was no good, so I binned that. And you basically got to lay it on the wing and get it straight with the wing, and then slide it up to the A-pillar with the bracket, and it's not too hard once you've done one. But I got that on so we could go in the deep water, and I had my diff breathers, so we were safe up to the clutch basically. So yeah, spent the rest of that year basically doing green lanes. So the last of 2016 was just going out and getting the truck bloody muddy and having good fun basically. Finding the limits of it a few times, I must admit, having to get pulled out and whatnot, and I snapped a rear set of leaves on the offside, so that's always fun when it's your daily. But yeah, the small winch broke when I was out. I was pulling me out of something and started to lose power and kind of forgot about it and went to use it another day, and the thing was broken and the motor had gone basically. And again I went past mechanics just on the off chance, like talking to him, and he says, oh, I got an electric power steering motor out of a Vauxhall, do you want that? I said, yeah, why not? And turns out this motor's, for some reason, it's 12 volt, but it runs like a fucking steam engine. It's so slow, it's not even got any gearing on it. So I think it's like, you know, not a 4-pole motor, it must be like a 20-pole motor. But anyway, so that got me thinking. I've been buggering around with this and had it kicking around for a while, and I thought, well, what if we get that motor and stick it on the winch? So I made a little of that adapter shaft and welded it together, made a new housing that bolted to the winch with the original motor bolt pattern, and then made a step in it and the bolt pattern for the Vauxhall motor, and plugged it all up and tried it, and the winch ran about a quarter of the speed, but it wouldn't stop. It was strong as anything. So that was on the front for the remainder of that year, and it was chooching along well, to be honest. And I spent the rest of 2016, sort of Christmas time, trying to wind up the fuel on a Mark II pump, because I'd seen all these posts on you know, Mazda Bravo, Ford Courier and all that, and the YouTube vids of winding up Bosch VE pumps, and I'm thinking, well, it's an inline distributor pump, but it's fucking fly-by-wire. And I'm like, well, you know, there's not a fuel screw on it, so don't know about that. Kind of put it back to the back of my mind and what have you. And then come January 2017, I thought, right, I want to do a body lift. So I'd been looking online. I didn't even know about the Ford Ranger page until like last year before. So I was looking online. I couldn't find any bloody information about body lift, and what I could find was a bit, you know, oh, it might fit, it might not, you might have to extend this, but you might not. So I just decided to buy a kit, have a quick look round at what needed doing. It didn't seem too bad. So I just went for it. Got a body lift kit off Milner's. Took me 2 days to do the body lift, because half the bolts and things that they give you were the wrong fucking size, and the blocks, yeah, they give you a 10mm block and a 10mm bolt, but the hole in the cab and the original bolt's 8mm or whatever, it's 2mm too small. It's a right old game. So we got that cracked out and basically amended half the stuff they give me and what have you. And I took the bumper off, because obviously there's a gap between the body and the bumper. So that was the kick in the balls for me, for right James, you're going to put a winch bumper on this. You know, we're going to do it. So the body lift was all sorted. The sticks were a bit further down in the body, but ended up making some extensions and cutting the gear retainer plate out a little bit, but you don't have to touch the tunnel. So I'm driving it to work the next week, and I'm thinking, well, the steering feels a little bit, I don't know how to explain it really. It's like hard stiff. It's a bit fudgy. And I realised, because some people said the rag joint and the spline shaft would slide out enough. Well, like did it. The fucking rag joint were like that. A real S shape to it. So I kind of thought, nah, we need to take that out and do it properly. So took that out, made a steering spacer, popped that in, you know, sorted that. And basically just had to drop the rad after that. So cut the radiator mounts off the core support, drop it down about 40mm, weld some new mounts on, make some extenders for the top and whatever, cut the hoses a little bit, but you know, sorted it all out, done it all pucker. So whilst this is all going on, I've done the body lift, I'm looking at winch bumper designs and how to build things, and I'm scribbling in my book at work every day thinking, well, if I make a frame here and I can make a bracket and make this bolt together, and I'd been drawing up stuff for months, you know, before that, and none of it had come into fruition. It was just scribbles on paper. So I took this all off and I thought, no, I need to do it, you know, 100%. So I parked my truck up against a wall, set up a plumb line, and just measured back from this plumb line to basically everything, like intercooler, core support, body mounts, chassis mounts, all these holes, headlights, grille, everything. So we basically had a 3D map of where everything was from this line. And I got it into Google SketchUp, moved everything about, you know, drew it all back from how it was, and got the shape of it all, and made what I think was a half decent looking winch bumper. So I took the plunge, converted it to a DXF and got it laser cut out, which was a bit of a step in the dark, because I was like, you know, I don't know how well this is going to fit even, because, you know, it was the prototype basically. But yeah, not bad. It didn't turn out too bad. So I was staying late at work and finishing my winch bumper, welding all that up and stuff, and that was getting sent for powder coating. And whilst I was doing that, I thought I want somewhere in the back to keep all my tools and stuff, because I had the canopy off at that time. So I set about building a 5-foot toolbox, and it had a leisure battery in it, like auxiliary battery, a stereo and some speakers, big compartment for like air hoses, jump leads, the lot. Huge great big thing. It was so big you could fit a farm jack underneath the lid, you know. So that kept all my stuff in there, and that was all good. Built that up, had lights in it and stuff, so you could see inside in the dark when you was out at night. That was proper handy. So I sent that off to get powder coated as well afterwards. And then by April of 2017, all the stuff was done, painted, and obviously the winch had been sat there since after Christmas, so that finally all went together and was on the truck. And I was pretty chuffed with it. Like, we were going about testing out the winch. Didn't get stuck as much as I'd thought now that I had a winch, because I had mud tyres and whatever on and what have you, but we still had a lot of fun. But before I fitted the winch bumper, I managed to get a bigger intercooler, so I put a Mishimoto 18 by 12, I think it is. Whopping great big thing on there, because I wanted to get more out of this. I still wanted to get more out of the engine, and I couldn't wind the fuel up, but I was still looking at other avenues, if you know what I mean. I'd already done a decat and other things, and I'd wound the boost up, but I still couldn't get any extra fuel above that. So we mates are like saying, what do you want to do for the summer, you know? And we said we'd go up north again, and we'd go like Barron-Furness all the way up to Scotland. And I thought again, sleeping arrangements. And I thought, shit, I ain't got no canopy on the back. So I come up with an idea that I'd build another ladder rack type thing, but that slots in tailgate. So I'd built this sort of tradie rack and roof rack bars that go along the top, and then made some telescopic ones inside that you could kind of pull out, and it made like a 4.5 metre awning that you could drape a tarp over. And then I'd put some hooks on there so you could sleep in hammocks underneath it, like 2 at a time sort of thing. And got that all built and painted, ready for the trip up north like. And I was still looking at getting more fuel out, and I was looking at the VW 1.9 engines, because they've got a fly-by-wire injection pump, but it's still a Bosch VP style like we've got basically. So I was looking on the Rover diesel forums, I don't know how I got there, and come across this thing of MG L series diesel. They're obviously fly-by-wire, and people were putting big injectors on them and stuff, and people were getting crazy power from what basically is a 1.6 bloody diesel, and they also do 1.8s and stuff. But anyway, and I come across this guy called Rover Ron that was making these tuning boxes and these MAF cheater boxes. So you could get a MAF, I forgot what we called it. You get like a MAF box that adjusts the MAF signal, and a tuning box for the fuel pump. So I rang him up and said, you know, can I get a tuning box for VW or whatever, but can you leave the plugs off it, and what signals does this box want to see basically, because I've got a wiring diagram for the fuel pump, so I can kind of hodgepodge it in and make it work, because at the end of the day the fuel pump works in the same manner as any other fly-by-wire fuel pump, if you get me. And he said, well, what vehicle is it for? I said, well, it's for an old Ranger. He said, well, let me check, because I think I'd done a few of these back when they were, you know, back when they were hot, when they were new. So he gets back to me the next day and he says, yeah, I've done 3 of these before, back in the day when they were popular as such. He goes, I'll email you the fitting instructions, and you can check the wiring colours on the loom and check that that's the same pump. So I said, yeah, that's cool. And he emails me them over, and I'm looking, and it is the same pump and what have you. So I took a punt on one of them, and I got to hand it to him, good lad and everything. It only cost you about 100 quid, and that transformed the truck totally. You know, that was a Synergy 4, I think, so VP, but it was one of the first versions of it, so it didn't have none of this HSF or anything on it, or pre-boost fueling. So it was, you could adjust when the fueling kicked in after a certain amount of boost and how much of it. And that really got the truck going. I mean, obviously since then I'd fitted an EGT gauge and a boost gauge and other stuff, but that got the truck picking up, tracking fairly well. So I took that on our little excursion up north and that, and truck run fine, you know. Tuning box didn't throw any lights on or anything, or didn't have no trouble with it, so that was all good. We had a good old laugh up Grisdale, I think it was, went up Grisdale Rocks, and the truck was bouncing around and going up some right big steps and things, and thinking, you know, how the hell are we getting up here? And truck bloody went up there. I must hand it to it. It's done all right. You know, some sketchy old moments, and mate's Frontier was following. He was having to ride the clutch a bit, like that was bloody steep. But come back from that and still didn't have the rock sliders or anything, and you know, just had muds and 2-inch lift, but only on the front. And we come back from that, and the fucking drive from Inverness, where we finished up, to home was about 13 hours total. We'd stopped for 2 hours in Lake District for lunch. That was about a 13-hour slog. And my God, it's about as long as you want to spend in a Mark II, I think. But yeah, so about a month after that, we decided to go down Cornwall, and I wanted to change the rear frame a little bit, so I took that back off and put some roof bars and stuff on it, and made it more of like a roof rack rather than just roof rails. And went on holiday, took the family to Cornwall and what have you. Didn't get much done after that, because after I come back from Cornwall, I stumbled upon a dinghy and bought a dinghy. Was prattling around with that, doing a bit of fiberglass and what have you. But fast forward around to 2018, put the canopy back on because it was getting cold and windy and stuff just before Christmas, so I put it on for New Year, and I was going deeper and deeper in water, and we were going through places like the Galt and Welney Wash and things, and what I'd call proper wading basically. So I was like, right, I need to sort some gearbox breathers, and from what I could find, you couldn't buy any, not in England. You could buy some billet racecraft or something they were, from Australia, but all 4 fittings were threaded, and I thought that was a bit funky, so I double checked and I pulled them out of the gearbox, and they're tapered thread. They're not tapered, sorry, not tapered thread. They're tapered fitting, so it's like a Morse taper drill shank kind of thing. So, you know, make with that what you will. They were supplying some threaded ones for some reason, so you obviously had to take the box off, drill and tap the gearbox case, blow it all out and put it back. And I thought, well geez, that's a hassle just to fit some bloody breathers, ain't it? So again, I made some custom gearbox breathers and made them myself, and basically mimicked the original taper and what have you for a hose fitting. And put them on and that, and we was going through Welney Wash, and that was like bottom of the headlights, and we'd been out Newmarket way. For those of you that know Newmarket and that, it's Western Colville Brinkley. There's a byway that goes through like a ditch, and me and a mate had gone through it in the summer, and we come through this winter rainy day, and we see the water up the bottom of the footbridge, and we thought, yeah, we just remember it being like a dip. We said, yeah, we'll go for that, and the fucking water come over the bonnet and everything. It was proper deep. When we got out the other side, and it was like shit, you know, that a bit had come in the heater and dribbled down the footwell and what have you. But the old truck done it good, and that got me kind of hooked on wading and things and mucking around in water. So not only wading, we've been out more and more, out Brandon ways, as far north as sort of Whittlesea way, and we'd been out all about the country and things, and about the county, doing these green lanes that we could find. We'd been buying OS maps willy-nilly, and if we were out somewhere, we'd go look at one and we'd go do them. And at the time, all 3 of my mates had trucks basically, so we was going out regular. So yeah, we was going out like every other weekend and taking on more sort of serious stuff. And I bloody come along into this gully in this trench, and the old truck went through it. But as I come out, the truck was rolling like that, and the door, it put the door on the side of the ground basically. There was a mound on the side, and smushed the side of the door, the passenger back door. And I thought, fuck, you know, that wouldn't have happened if I had rock sliders on. So I started looking at rock sliders, and only a couple of people had done it, and they'd got them built by I think his name's Alex or something, at Viking Fabrication. He'd done a few. And I just discovered the forum then, so I was looking at what other people had done, thinking, there is other people, you know, modifying these trucks. But I still couldn't find anywhere to actually buy them off the shelf, if you know what I mean. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? So I started measuring all the chassis and drawing stuff up and what have you. And I got some tubes bent up at Safety Devices up in Mildenhall. They do tube bending to order. So I got some tubes bent up, and long story short, me and my mate both had Rangers with body lift and what have you. So we decided to get 4 made and we'd split it. So we got the tubes bent up, and I bought some 50 by 30 box section and some 50 by 50 box section. And I made 4 sets, and they come out alright, to be honest. They're nice and strong. My mates stick out a lot further because he wanted them like steps, but mine I've kind of canted up towards the sill, so they're a bit more protective of the doors and the sill and what have you. But they come out alright. Like I say, you can jack up on them with a farm jack and lift the truck up, and you know, they ain't going to shift for no one. So I'd made those, and then my mate's talking about going down south for a trip this time, starting in the New Forest and ending up at Land's End. So I was game for that, and I'd taken like the roof rack off and everything and got rid of that, and I'd sold the rack I'd built. I decided I didn't want it. I wanted the canopy back on, because back then I had a little one and we was taking the buggy around and stuff, and I wanted somewhere to put the buggy in the back and keep it locked up. So I put the canopy back on, but didn't have no roof rack, and I didn't have the ply lining in it and all that. So I decided to make a full length roof rack and ordered some 40mm box section, made about, I think it's about 3.2 metres. It goes right from the window right to the back of the canopy. But obviously to mount that, I had to build a steel frame inside the canopy to beef it all up. So I'd done all that and what have you, put some light bars on it. A change from the usual spotlights that I quite liked, but they're quite bright, so not bad. So yeah, went down New Forest and that, stopped at Southampton, New Milton I think it was, went down to Portland, slept on Portland on top of there in the trucks. That was quite good fun. Went down, well, each day basically, skipped down to Land's End and come back. Had one last night in Portsmouth, and coming back out of Portsmouth that morning, the truck weren't too good. It was overheating, and I'd only got about 20-30 miles down the road and was blowing out the expansion bottle. So that was a bit of a shitter. So my mate towed me to Exeter on a rope, and we bought a tow pole from Machine Mart, and then my mate towed me on the pole to, I think it was Ilminster or somewhere near there. We got a fair ways, and the fucking pole snapped going down a hill. So he was like, ah, shit. Couldn't fix it on the side of the road, you know, it didn't have a weld or anything, obviously. So I was like, right, fuck it, one last time. So I took the rad out and the stat and everything on the side of the road, flushed it out, filled it back up. And I must have only driven 5 or 10 miles to the nearest pub, and it was already getting hot. So I thought, shit, man, that's, you know, something happening bad here. So long story short, I managed to get it home, and it had cracked the head between the water jacket and the intake tract on cylinder 3. So I'd put the new head on it and everything, and basically done top end rebuild on it. Had the injectors sent off, took the manifolds into work whilst they were all off and had them ported out, blasted them all, ported the exhaust and the turbo, enlarged the wastegate hole so I didn't get any wastegate creep. Loads of stuff like. And once I'd put it back together, it was a different truck. It was just, you know, it pulled better, it had more torque down low. It's just a beast basically. So that was quite good. And no kidding, about 2 or 3 weeks after I'd done all that rebuild and took it into work, a bloke over in sheet metal goes, my neighbour's got one like that, but it's older. And I think he's sat on his drive for about a year. I said, alright. you know. And he goes, yeah, he'll probably sell it, I think, because it's been sat there for so long. So I thought, well, it depends how much he wants for it, you know, because I've just spent like best part of 700-800 quid on top end rebuild, and he's actually got a lot of cash spare at the moment. So he asked his mate and whatever, and he said, yeah, come look at it. He sat there for a while, and you know, here's what it is. And I went and looked at it, and the battery was dog flat, and I was having a look round it and that. Anyway, he puts the jump leads on it, and she fired right up, no nasty noises or anything. And I said, what's the deal with this then, mate? Because I can't see any airbags, there's no ABS pump and what have you. And he goes, oh well, I tried to decode the VIN on this Mazda thing, and it's funny. And he goes, I reckon it was supposedly it was a Thai import or something. It was a import. So I said, oh right. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, right, look at that. It's got a damn cable, you know, mechanical injection pump. It's got no cat, no ABS. Like I say, no airbags. It's an Australian spec truck, you know. It's got cylindrical air filter and all everything, and a hand throttle and whatever. And I'm like, well, you know, how much do you want for it? And he goes, well, scrap money really, because it's failed its MOT. And I look round at the wings and that, and you could literally put your fist through the inner wing, and geez, it was in pretty rusty shape, to be fair. But anyway, ended up getting that. Went back over there with my mate's Land Rover, and he trailered it back for me. And I thought, right, I've finally got something that I can wind the fuel up on. So I wanted to do a pump swap for a while. So I thought, well, I can have a fuel pump off of that, because the fuel pump on eBay was like 500 quid. So you needed a fuel pump, throttle cable, all that stuff, you know, pedal box, etc. So I was thinking, well, buying this truck might be cheaper than getting all that stuff separately. So I was looking into pump swaps and stuff for quite a while, and come to the conclusion that everybody else that had done it had just left the glow plug light flashing. They just switched the pump, left all the wires there for the original pump just hanging, and the ECU wasn't happy, you know, it was throwing up lights galore. But I could only find 2 or 3 people that had done it. And I'm thinking, well, there must be a better way, you know. So forward on a little bit, a truck come up for sale the next year, not too far from me, with a blown gearbox. And you know what it's like, you say to the missus, oh, can I go have a look? And she's like, do you need another truck? And it's like, yeah. So I went to look at it and what have you, and the bloke was a fair bloke, you know. He said, it's my first car, but he just owes me too much money, because he had to have a top arm on it, and there was a receipt in the paperwork for a top arm, and the garage was charging like 260 quid, man. So that's like a half-hour job if you buy a new arm. So they charged him an awful lot of money. I think he'd spent a bit of money on it, if you know what I mean. So I went and looked at it, and it was pretty clean and what have you, and basically the missus, you know, the idea was I was going to fix it up for the missus' little brother, because he was like 18 at the time. So I thought, yeah, I can get that, and we can put the gearbox out the green truck into that and make him a little off-roader, because he was well green for off-roading. And then I got it in that area, and it sat there for a bit. I didn't really get straight onto it, you know what projects are like. But that got me thinking. I've got a Mark II sat here with an electronic pump, and the parts truck with a mechanical pump. We could do like a dummy run pump swap on it. And I did. I built a puller at work to get the injection pump off the gear, switched the pump over and what have you, and just jerry-rigged up a throttle for it. And she ran fine, she fired right up once I got the timing right. And the only problem I could see was obviously the glow plug light was flashing, because the ECU thought, you know, there's no pump connected. And the tach still worked and everything, it was all good. And I thought, right, do I just wire up the glow plug light to, you know, the oil light and do a dodgy? Or do I just take out the ECU? So I unplugged the ECU and ran mint, you know, it ran fine, everything started fine. But there was no tack. So I thought, alright, just got to sort the tack. And I've traced the wiring diagrams back and looked at a mate's truck and figured out that the tack runs off the crank sensor. So unless you want to keep the crank sensor, and you've basically got to keep the whole ECU just to run the glow plugs and attack. I thought, well, that's a bit silly. And I don't really want an ECU in here because we were doing more and more wading, and you know, we'd gone out once and my mate had got stuck. We'd gone through this river, and he'd gone a funny angle, and he'd gone to reverse up a bit and come out, and the front of the truck, man, just sank. So his driver's side wheel was like underwater, and the water's up the door and it's coming in. He's shouting, you know, the pedals are underwater, James, come winch me out. And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really want an ECU if I'm in that situation. I mean, it survived, his truck still runs and everything, but you don't want to get the ECU wet, do you? So that got me thinking, what if I do like a whole transplant of the wiring and the control box for the glow plugs and everything. But then they got me thinking, well, this hasn't got ABS and mine has, and this hasn't got this, that and the other, you know, so the half the wiring loom's not going to work. So that kind of sat on the back burner for a little bit, and I moved on to making some rear lift shackles because I still hadn't lifted the back of the truck up. So I took one off, measured it and what have you. Again, I couldn't find any to bloody buy, so I took one off to measure it. I'd drawn them up. I got, again, 4 cut out. Me and a mate did them. Put them on and tried them, what have you. Pucker, decent, lifted it up fine, rode fine. And literally before I could even have a week or two of getting them on there and using them, people are asking me where I've got them, whatever, and I ended up doing a few of them for people because they were so sought after. So I've got the lift shackles in, and they'd been over Christmas, and fast forward to like January 2019, I'd always wanted to build a long range tank. Now you can buy them from Australia and they're about $1,200, so in pounds that's about 700 quid, 650, plus shipping, plus import tax. Yeah, big bucks. So I had an idea. I thought I'd take the fuel tank out the green truck and we'll just measure it. We'll just start designing something. So that was January 2019. I took that fuel tank out, cut it in half, measured everything, measured all the holes, the flanges, the valves on it, and it didn't take me too long to draw it up. It just took a lot of nights measuring it from left to right, where everything sat basically and where everything was. And then I was underneath the truck measuring how much extra I could go and how much to the left and how much I could hang it over the prop and what have you. And so I think it was about March time, I got all that cut out, I got all the shapes cut out, and I got it tacked together and folded up and everything within like the first month, you know, on the back burner sort of style. And that sat there for a long while. For those of you on the forum, I didn't finish it until about February this year. It had been sat there and I'd had a go at fitting it, but it needed a little bit chopping out the corner for the handbrake cable and things, and it took me 13 months in the making to do it. But we ended up with a nice 130 litre tank, and she fits in, and there's more clearance behind it now and underneath it than there was originally. So that's handy. But anyway, going back to that, so I cut that out and was doing that. And I'd obviously got, you know, a snorkel and what have you and a bigger intercooler, but I hadn't done anything to the exhaust other than a decat and chopped the insides of the muffler out. But I'd obviously got the chrome bars and what have you kicking around, and I was going to get some bends, and I was looking at stainless 3-inch bends and stuff, and it's like £28 a bend and it's £9 a metre for the tube. And I'm thinking, well, this is getting expensive, you know, the truck's about 5 metres long, so you're going to need about 5 metres of tube and God knows how many bends. So I had this idea that I'll just use a stainless side step. So I'm looking on the label of the side steps, and it turns out they're 304 stainless anyway, which is what they use for exhaust. So a few late nights at work and what have you, welding up this dump pipe, and I'd mimicked the original dump pipe out 3-inch. I'd obviously had flanges and stuff made for it that I'd cut out and I'd measured up and I'd designed and what have you. So they were already there in my toolbox, sitting there ready. And yeah, made this 3-inch dump pipe, was happy with it. made the rest of the 3-inch system with a flexi and a 16-inch glass pack on it. And I thought, yeah, I want to hang it out the tub. I want to do a side exit, that'll look cool. So I got the old 4-inch hole saw out, cut a hole in the bottom of the bed, run that out, and yeah, I don't know how much difference it made, but it seemed to spool earlier. I don't know about overall power, because I've never actually had the truck dynoed. That's actually something I want to get into at a later date. But yeah, so I had this turbo back, you know, all the way system on it, and it came to, yeah, probably middle of 2019, and the green truck was sitting there, and I said to my mate, I've always wanted to build a camper, you know. And he goes, yeah, I do too. I want to use the back end of a truck, a Ranger. So I said, right, well, I want the front half of this green truck for the engine and all the control stuff. Do you want the back? He says, yeah. So, no kidding, one day we went down the field with a 9-inch grinder and a saw and what have you, and we just split the truck in half. He had the back half, and we stuck it on a trailer and took it back to his to make a trailer out of. And the front half, obviously, it still drove and everything because it's all mechanical and everything. So we stuck a bit of scaffolding welded to the back of the chassis and a little tyre on it, and we was driving around the field in 4-wheel, because obviously the front diff's still connected as a little 3-wheeler, and that was a right old laugh. So that kind of sat there until I decided to do the engine swap. So obviously these are 2.5 WLT3, which is a Euro compliant electronic engine. The Mazda was just a plain mechanical WLT. So I come to the conclusion that I was going to swap not just the pump but the entire engine, because the engine's got all the, or rather it hasn't got all the sensors that this one has, but it's got an extra port on it for the NE sensor on the timing gear, which drives your tack on a Mark 1. So I thought that would be a lot cleaner, and this engine's done a few less miles than mine and what have you, and it's all on there basically, because I didn't know if the pop pressures of the mechanical pump one were higher than the EDC pump. So I was planning all this stuff and what have you, and I'd been down the field the weekend before and pulled the body off of this green one and pulled the engine out ready, and I'd bought new injector washers and all this stuff and what have you, and new clutch and things. So about August time, I think it was, I got the gantry down the field, pulled the old engine out, put the older engine back in that's mechanical. It took me 4 days in total. I swapped an engine on Charlie's truck before because he snapped a cam belt, and we'd done that in about 11 hours, I think it was, on the driveway. So we done alright. But I booked a few days off work for this one because I knew it was going to be a bit different. And yeah, in the end it took me 4 days. I had to make some stuff for it and little bits and pieces, only little things. I bought all new engine mounts, genuine Mazda engine mounts, all the rubber hoses and stuff that, you know, you do when you got the engine out, spigot bearing, all that sort of stuff. So I dropped it in, and I took the Mark II wiring loom pretty much back to about the ABS pump area. Had it all in strands basically. Got rid of the ones I didn't need. The Mazda uses a few solenoids and things, and an idle up solenoid for the AC. So connected all that up and basically used the wires that were going to the ECU to go to the high idle solenoids and stuff like that. So popped that all in and what have you. Started up fine and everything. Ran it into work for a few weeks. And I noticed, well, I noticed the same night obviously, the tack weren't working. When you were revving it, the tack was sitting at 5 or 6 grand, and when you revved it, the tack went downwards. So I thought, this is weird. But obviously you just had to get on with it. There's obviously something different in the Mark 1. So driving it to and fro to work and what have you, done a few bits on it, like drilled and tapped the bung for the EGT probe and the exhaust manifold. And playing around with the fuel pump a little bit and things. And I put the oscilloscope on my Mark 1 engine and on my mate's Mark 2. And what it is the Mark 1 is on an NE sensor, so the faster it revs, the more pulses you get, it's higher frequency. the Mark II engine was pulse width modulated signal. So as you rev it, the pulses get longer rather than like that, they get longer. So that's why it was operating in a different manner. So long story short on that, I ended up building a set of hybrid clocks. So it's a Mark I clock with a Mark II back circuit board to drive the ABS lights and all that stuff, because it's got a transistor on that. If you put a set of Mark I clocks in a Mark II, the tack won't work and the ABS light will glow dim the whole time. Top tip. So done the engine swap and everything, was happy with that. The next thing I wanted to address was the back axle. So the black truck that I had was meant for my brother-in-law or whatever. He couldn't get insurance on it and stuff on the end and ended up buying a bloody Focus. So that kind of sat down the field, and me and my mate were slowly pinching parts off it and things and what have you, and a good lad from the forum come and got the heater and all that sort of stuff for his Everest. That's another story. But so I basically put that allocated to parts. So I took the back axle off of that, took the third member out, took it into work, stripped it all down, and I wanted to make the LSD tighter in the back. So I'd add that apart and I was looking at changing the clutches first of all, getting a new clutch pack. Couldn't find a clutch pack for love nor money. Was looking at Dana Spicer kits, but none of them are actually listed for the Ford Ranger. All the other kits for the Dana 35 wasn't really, you know, it was hit and miss whether it was going to actually work, and the clutch kits are about 80 quid. So, you know. But I come to the conclusion that the clutches weren't actually coated with friction material like a standard LSD clutch. They're metal with oil grooves in. So as long as the oil grooves are on the clutch plates, you can still use them. So although the clutch plates have worn down a little bit, yeah, they're fine until the rings are gone. So what I decided to do was shim it up. So I got the profile of the spring and copied it, cut some out of 0.5 stainless, packed them in there, and the breakaway wouldn't even register on the torque wrench. I got like a 30 to 200 torque wrench. It weren't even registering. So it was pretty, to be honest, when I took it off, that's the best feeling LSD I'd found. Like, you could spin the wheel and there was clearly resistance when you were spinning it, whereas usually when they're flogged out you can just fucking wang them round. So when I took it off, it felt in fairly good nick, but the breakaway was still less than 30 Newton meters, which is a bit pants. So I'd stuck a couple of these shims in and what have you, and managed to get the breakaway to 86, which is quite good. And I stuck another, I think it was 0.2 in, and the breakaway was over 100, but it was not very consistent. So I took them back out and set the breakaway at 86. And obviously I wanted to beef up the quite common thing of the pan rusting out on the back of the axle, the oil pan. So I designed a new diff pan, got a couple cut out and bent up. I got 3 of them made in case I fucked one up. And was like, right, I'll have one on the back of that axle and I weld it on before I put the third member back in, and then it's done, you know, it's not going to ever be a problem. And by the time I'd got one made and what have you, and was going to weld it on, my mate's like, oh, what are you doing with the others? I said, well, I don't know really. And he basically ended up having them, and that became like a thing then of like, oh, you know, I can do these diff pans, people actually need them. So started making a few diff pans and whatnot. And the other thing I thought I was going to do was weld some different shock mounts on this axle. So the third member's all built up and sorted, it's just the case to do. And I was going to gusset it and basically turn the shock mount so that on a standard Mark II, the eyes are in line with the sideways of the truck basically. So when you flex it, it really hammers the bush. So I was thinking if you span the mount round 90 degrees, when you flex it, you wouldn't be fighting the bushes. It would, you get a lot more flex, and obviously you want longer shocks and whatever as well. So that was at work and what have you, and I've been getting on with that, which by the way I've still not assembled. I need to do that when we go back. Meanwhile, after doing that, I was doing the fuel tank and what have you. Got the fuel tank sorted, eventually got that in, and then the rest of that year was just spent buggering around making more stuff really. Yeah, but we done a few Green Lane trips before Christmas and whatnot. Went down Saffron Walden with a guy I know, and there's some good lanes down there. There's a good day to be had down there. So yeah, me and a buddy had been down Saffron Walden and doing some good lanes down that way. Also South Cams, like Bartlow, is it Bartlow? And all that area. That's quite good, some good lanes down there, quite scenic. And come around September time, I think it was, I see this truck for sale not too far from me, and it's the last of the Mark IIs. It's a 55 plate. It's clean basically. It's nice, but it don't run. So I went and had a look at it. Just thought, well, for starters, I didn't bother going and look at it. I thought, no way. But it was on there for a while, and I thought, I'll go have a look at that. And I got there, and I'm looking around it, and I'm like, man, this is clean, you know. There's hardly any rust on it. There's like a bit of rust on one of the doors, but there's no rust on the wings or anything like this. And it's the last of the Mark IIs. It's got a leather interior, you know. I'm practically jizzing myself. But the lady's like, yeah, I took it to one of my friends and he couldn't scan it, so he didn't know what was wrong with it. And I'm thinking, well, you can't scan the Mark 1s, can you? So how much does he know? How much does he know about Mark 2s to, you know, be troubleshooting it, sort of thing? And she said one bloke come and took it on a low loader. He was an angry boy. He went and looked at it, and he reckons it's fuel pump. So I was like, okay, worst comes to the worst, I've got my old fuel pump off my original Mark II, and we can slap that on there and see how it goes. So flat towed it home with a mate, took it to mine, was looking around it and what have you, and it ended up being the glow plug relay was absolutely fudged, so the glow plugs weren't coming on. So, you know, they'd obviously done a good job of troubleshooting that, hadn't they? So, new glow plug relay, and basically I bled it up and everything, and it fired, but it only ran for about 5 or 10 seconds. So I'm like, but it would run if you pumped the fuel primer. So I'm thinking, right, it's definitely the vane pump in the front of the injection pump that pulls the fuel up from the tank. It's not feeding it. So I took the pump off, went and got my old Mark II fuel pump, that's the electronic one, popped that on there, and yeah, bled it up, it runs fine. So that's my project for the moment, or at then, you know, it's still here. So got a nice 55 plate Mark II, and she's golden really. I don't want to lift it, but I want to drop it a little bit and maybe make it a fast one, which brings me on to my next thing actually. So Black Thunder was looking pretty good end of 2019. I've done everything to it that I wanted to do, well, bar a few things. But by then we'd had a rear winch, front winch, rock sliders, you know, the lot. My mate 3D printed me a roof console a couple of years back, and we had that in there. And it's kind of like really getting down the tick list, if you know what I mean. So that was like another project that I got. And just before Christmas, a bloke from the forum come down to my mate's house, and I went and met him there. And it was Philip, and he got this Mark IV on 37-inch tyres and an 8-inch lift, and this thing was just a monster. So we're all in awe at that and what have you, and he's on about engine swapping it to a Mark I engine because you can tune them better and that, and I said yeah, that's what you want to do, you know, that's what I've done. So we was all like in agreement about that. You know, Mark I's are a lot easier to tune, but I hadn't done anything other than intercooler, exhaust, intake, you know. I hadn't put a bigger turbo or anything yet, and I see a lot of the Aussie guys running TD04s and stuff, and I'd been to the scrapyard to actually get a TD04, got one off a Volvo, or very nearly got one off a Volvo, and the scrapyard owner come round and said that he didn't sell turbos, which was quite nice, after I'd spent 2 hours taking it off on my back on the floor, which is quite cool. Not. So that plan was kind of dead in the water. I was pretty pissed off about that, and I was looking at just buying Subaru turbos and stuff. So obviously I'd make a manifold and what have you. I mean, I got the flanges cut out probably a year and a half ago for the head, you know, the exhaust flanges and stuff. So everything was there to do it, but I hadn't decided what I was going to do and hadn't got a turbo. Yeah, so come to Christmas, I was thinking this clutch is nearly slipping, you know, I can feel it. So I was looking at heavy duty clutches and whatnot, and the last time I bought a clutch from Milner, by the way, the clutches are alright, it's just everything else you've got to watch out for. It was about 120 quid for a clutch, so I looked again at how much they were, and they were about 150 quid. What do you mean, they've gone up? And I thought, no, I really want a HD one. So I remember Luke Fitzsimmons on the forum saying that he'd done one for a family member's Ranger. So I got in touch with him, and he managed to do me a heavy duty clutch and pressure plate for, I think it was about 160 quid. So I slapped that in over Christmas this year, with a new spigot bearing, release bearing, all that stuff. And golden, it works good, nice and light. You wouldn't believe that it's a heavy duty clutch, to be fair. Yeah, what can I say? It's not slipping, it's good. So anyway, I've got in touch with Philip about something, and he said, oh, you know, I've sold the Mark IV and I've got the Mark I engine that I was going to put in it. Sooner or later I'm on my way down there to go get it, you know, because I can't resist another mechanical engine. And anyway, he's got this TD04 off his Subaru, which is a 13, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I need. But obviously it's shag, so I got it off him. Good lad, cheers mate. And the plan is to get that rebuilt, put a new core in it, and then I can finally crack on and put a bigger turbo on Black Thunder. Just got to get some like runners bent up and make an equal length manifold, and then see how she goes. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are up to date with Black Thunder at the moment. Like the fuel tank and everything's in, and the TD04's on the back burner now, and just got to put the back axle in once that's welded up and sprayed. So the list is very near complete for Black Thunder. Future projects wise, there's not much more I can do to it, but I've kind of made a rod for my own back because I've done all this wiring and whatever the last month or so, and I must say it's looking alright, it's looking good. But I've managed to fuck up the roof console. The roof console was 3D printed out of PLA or something. Anyway, it had sagged in the sunlight from all the hot summers, and I put it in the oven to try and, you know, get it back straight again. Yeah, mocked that right up, so that was a pile of goo. So I'm going to have to make a new roof console, and I'm going to make it out of wood with a bit of fiberglass and do it half cab length rather than just a box, so it'll go up to the interior light. Like I say, TD04 13, get that on there. All the intake, all the exhaust side of the work's done. I'll just have to make a new dump pipe. I want to do an 11mm delivery head on the fuel pump, but I've got to save up for that one and do a bit more learning and stuff, a bit more research. I know a bit about the VE pumps, but there's a few things that you need to get right when you're changing the fuel head and stuff. I have played with the fuel pump a little bit. I've made a slightly different profile boost pin that's to my own design, and adjusted all the fuel screws and things and the off boost fueling, and she seems pretty good. She's not too sooty or anything like that, so you can, you know, creep past the old Vosa guy. But yeah, the other thing I want to do, which is really big in the scheme of things, is a solid front axle swap. It's been on my mind for about 6 or 8 months. Obviously I've got this, what is a parts truck now, sat down the field, and obviously that's on a chassis still. So the idea is once I was going to go for a Land Rover axle with a series centre in it to get the gear ratio lower, but might actually end up changing that. But basically, doing my research, looking for axle with the same ratios, or at least a rear with the same ratio that I can switch at the same time. And the idea is to totally whop out the front suspension on this spare chassis, put some coil spring buckets in the chassis, coil springs, radius arms, and a solid front axle. And then once I know that it's all sat up right and all the geometry's right and everything, I'll get that chassis powder coated or galvanised or treated or something, and then one day next summer, whenever it happens, we'll do like a little Black Thunder transplant, and I'll get the cab and whatever off of mine and put it on that chassis and do a bit of a rebuild. Obviously you'll have to make like a custom front prop or what have you, but that's something I really want to do, because you can get lockers for the back of these at like 800 quid, but you still got independent up front, which is alright, you know, don't get me wrong, you get a lot of ground clearance with independent suspension up front, but it just doesn't flex like crazy. And I've got the rear flexing pretty damn good, but the front's just, it can't keep up basically. And when you get cross axled, it's not great. So yeah, front axle swap would be a good thing to do. It's just going to be one of those things. It takes time. All the chassis buckets and stuff are going to have to be drawn up and cut out and bent and things. And the ABS sorted. I might even end up machining the stub axle or the swivel axles and putting a sensor in there or something, making a reluctor ring or something. It's going to be a big project, especially to retain the ABS and what have you. But we'll make it work. I think the standard steering box will work and what have you. One thing I did think about years ago was actually extending the suspension arms a few inches so that you got more travel per degree of movement, but that was shot dead in the water. So yeah, solid axle, turbo, roof console. Also want to build a tray. Well, I've been on. I built a tray. I built the frame for a tray for my mate about a year ago, and he done all the rest of the work and the extra brackets and things for it. But I built the tray and the tipper, and it's always been on my mind since that when this tub gets rusty, I should take it off and build my own tray, and that's what I'm going to do soon. We'll see. I don't think it's going to happen this summer. Things have been too mucked up already with all this shit going on. But yeah, maybe next summer we'll take the bed off, make some toolboxes underneath it, nice tray with a headache rack and everything, and just generally make it a good old truck, you know. She runs pretty good and what have you. She's had some fair love the last few months, so it's one of those things. I don't think I'm ever going to sell it, you know. I know people say they're never going to sell their car, but no way. Me and the mate were joking the other day saying that, you know, you've got to enjoy this diesel thing while it lasts, because 10-15 years time they're going to be wiped out. The government will be telling you you've got to drive some electric appliance around, you know. You'll be driving around in some Hyundai washing machine. So we said once we're done with it, you know, once the government tells you that's it, you can't drive them no more, we'll have to park it up in the barn or something with a few jugs in the back, and then maybe in like, you know, 50 years time someone will come up to it and they'll be like, what the hell is this? And there'll be Black Thunder sat there with some barrels of diesel sat in the back and she'll fire right up, you know. Good old mechanical engines. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it's a long one, but I've been wanting to do it for a while. So yeah, crack on with the projects, keep them Rangers going, and we'll see what we can build this year, eh?